Hello folks, this is Valkoor DrakeRider, and today I'm bringing you my newest project, the Fjord Defense. This is a game that operates sort of like a tower defense type game. So yeah, here it is, another game within a game. So this time we've been charged by the leader of the fjord to defend against invaders. So first, before we go ahead and get into that by heading out the door, we're going to walk through this tutorial, and it's going to tell us how exactly we're going to go about defending the fjord from invaders. So as we step inside, we come across this whole tutorial section. And the first thing that we're going to learn is that we have 3 workers whom we can command. When we jump in front of them, it's going to prepare an icon, and these different icons represent the kind of tasks that they can perform. They have lumbering, mining, and training. Lumbering is going to produce wood, and it's going to take 30 seconds for the worker to come back and produce that 1 wood item. When they mine, they will be producing stone after 40 seconds, and when they train, they will be producing a soldier after a minute and a half. So it's important to note that training takes a very long time, and that has something to do with just how useful and important these soldiers really are. Now, when we send more than 1 worker, since we have 3, to the same exact task, particularly for mining and training, we have rare rewards that can spawn. Now, the more workers that you send to a particular task, the higher this chance is going to be. So if we send multiple workers to mine, we have a chance to get gold. And if we send multiple workers to train, we have a chance to get heroic units, which of course are stronger than regular units. So we're going to go ahead and head over here, and we have a crafting anvil of sorts. And this is where we're going to take those resources that our workers are getting us and turn them into something useful to defend the fjord. So 2 wood is going to yield us a barricade. A wood and a stone will yield us a stone spear, and a wood and a gold will yield us, of course, a gold spear, which is a stronger variant of the stone spear. We'll be getting to what those spears do in just a minute, but first let's talk about what the barricade does. Barricades are going to stop enemies before they can pass them and deal some damage to them while they break the barricade. It's going to deal especially high damage, 3 times damage, in fact, to the first enemy that passes in the group. So this means that these barricades are especially effective against high health enemies, where the first enemy will be able to survive multiple hits against the barricade, taking the full damage before they can reach your soldiers. Now your soldiers will behave very similarly and stop units who come in front of them. The enemy and your soldiers will then duel, and whichever one reaches 0 HP first will then die and allow the other to pass or stand their ground. Heroic units have twice the HP that our regular soldiers do, so they're going to be very valuable for trying to get the best value you can against these enemy units. So last, we're going to go ahead and talk about our bow fixtures. Our bow fixtures are used to sink enemy boats before the enemy units can reach land. Just as before, jumping is going to alternate our choices between Stone Spear and Gold Spear, and pressing X is going to enter us into aiming mode. In aiming mode, moving forward is going to aim your spear to the right, and moving backwards will aim your spear to the left. And if you jump, of course, it's going to go ahead and fire the spear. So when we shoot the ship, it's going to take some damage. And if you shoot a damaged ship again, we're going to go ahead and sink it. It takes 2 spears, 2 stone spears that is, to sink most regular boats. However, a gold spear, being that it is rare and difficult to obtain, is going to sink those boats in just a single shot, no matter what boat it is. This is very high value, so going after those gold drops could be very important in the long run for your game. And now that we've gone through and discussed the entire tutorial, let's head on outside and we will give the actual game a try. Alrighty, and here we are in the primary portion of the house, the actual game. So the first thing we'll notice is that we have our soldiers and a barricade already lined up here. These are free ones that you get at the start of the game. You'll also notice that our enemy boats are coming in from either side of the fjord. One is a little bit faster approaching than the other, This is going to give us time later to figure out when we can shoot spears, perhaps at both of them during each wave. So after that, we're going to want to notice that we have a resource counter over here. This is going to keep track of how many of each resource that we actually have, as well as our spear count, and is going to help us right next to our crafting anvil to determine what we want and are able to craft. So you can see that we can't craft the gold spear right now because we have no gold. However, the barricade gives us the option to craft it because we have 2 wood, and similarly, the stone spear, which has the resources we need to craft, is also an option. So we're going to go ahead and craft 2 stone spears, and I'll go ahead and see if I can show you how those look. Perhaps maybe even what a miss or a hit or a sink look like. So we can go ahead and interact with this real quick. And we're going to try to hit our enemy boat. And we got some immediate success. We're going to have to wait just a second to be able to shoot it again. And then we're going to shoot it almost right away here. And see if we can... It looks like we got it, so we sunk our enemy ship. You can just see the barricade was interacted with by the boars, and they lost one of their units, and our soldiers managed to prevail over them. So now that all of the boars are dead, we're going to get 1 minute until the next wave spawns. During this time, and probably even beforehand, when I was showing you guys the rest of the stuff, we should send our workers out to get some resources. So let's go ahead and first off show you what wood collecting looks like. It's really quite simple. So, when our workers collect wood, which takes 30 seconds as you recall, they're going to come over here and they're going to chop some wood. Pretty simple, gets the job done. And when they're mining, they're going to be in the back in this cave. Now, far more interesting than them just swinging their axes at objects is going to be what it looks like when they actually commence training. So let's show you what that looks like. So when these guys train, they're each going to have their own unique animations that they perform. And of course, it's going to take a lot longer for them to do so, because it takes 1.5 minutes to actually train a soldier. But as you can see, these 2 are dueling. This guy is throwing a knife, and this guy is attacking this practice dummy here. Now, I actually have the time on these guys turned down a little bit so that they can spawn soldiers a lot quicker. And as you can see, we managed to spawn in 2 heroic units and a regular soldier, which was extremely lucky, because you have a 50% chance with 3 workers on the same task to get a rare material, so we got the 50%, and then you have a 25% chance with 2, so we managed to get both of the heroic units that we had a chance to get, which is phenomenal. So let's go ahead, perhaps we can watch the incoming enemy bears fight our bears for a minute and see how we fare. So you can see when they get here, they walk off of their boat and onto the dock and head towards us. It looks like they were able to just get through that group. Now, it is to note that we still have a heroic unit, so we may well have enough to actually defend against these guys, but if we don't, well, we're just gonna have to take the loss and give it another try. And unfortunately, one of the enemy units was able to make it through. So unfortunately, this time we're going to face defeat, and we're gonna have to give it another try. That's totally fine. This game is meant to be a challenge, and you're just gonna have to take each loss as a learning experience and try to get a win. That was only wave 2, it is to note as well. There are 4 waves total, and each wave is more increasingly difficult than the last, with enemies that have higher HP and other such improvements. But we'll go ahead, and after looking at our wonderful, lovely defeat screen, we'll go ahead and run out and give it another shot. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and give this our second attempt. I fixed the timing on our soldiers so that now they will take the full minute and a half, but even so, we're going to go ahead and start out with them because they're going to give us a nice, solid foundation for keeping ourselves safe from these enemies should they reach the shore. And then we're going to go ahead and craft both of our stone spears. Normally I wouldn't do this on the first wave, but I want to show you guys what it looks like to actually sink a ship, so we're going to do our best and try to make that happen. Alright, so we got here a little bit late, but we should still be able to do this. From the center here, I like to measure about a boat's length before I fire. I have different kind of ways that I remember what aim works well, because the distance the spear has to travel each time is a little bit different. So this time I like to do about a boat and a half, maybe. This one has the longest distance that it has to travel. So we're going to want to make sure that we do it nice and early to make sure that the spear can arrive on time. And it looks like we successfully sunk our ship there. Alright, so now all we have to do is we just have to wait for this last boat and its units to come over here and attack. In the meantime, we don't have too much to do because we're waiting on our workers to finish training our soldiers. Hopefully we'll get some heroic units in the mix there. And then once they're back, we can send them off to different tasks and see about maybe crafting some other materials. There we go, so we were getting some soldiers, and unfortunately this time we didn't manage to get a heroic unit. That's alright, we're going to send these guys off to go mining, see if we can get some gold early on here, because that would be really great for us. So let's see how these guys interact. You can see they got off their boat once it reached the dock. So of course they attack the barricade first. The first unit in the group dies because it took so much extra damage from that barricade, and our soldiers were able to fend off the enemies. Unfortunately, one of them was defeated. That still leaves us with four soldiers. That's not too bad. We would have liked a hero unit in there, to be honest, to really keep us safe, but we're doing alright for now. This is just the beginning. We're going to train some more soldiers and get that improved. But before that, we're going to go ahead and get some wood here to pair with our stone that we just gathered. Maybe even some gold if we were lucky. Let's go ahead and check on that. Wood's not going to take us very long to gather, so we'll be back there soon. And hey, we got some luck. We got a gold drop. So that's phenomenal. So we're going to be able to take that, and we're going to be able to craft a gold spear as a result of it. Now we're about to get 3 wood, so we'll be able to craft some combination of 3 spears if we would like to, and I think we're gonna opt for that, so I can show you some more spear shooting. So we're gonna go ahead and craft 2 more stone, and we're gonna craft the legendary gold spear here, which is gonna enable us to sink a ship right away. So we'll go ahead and we'll show you what both do, just as before. We'll send these guys now off to get some more soldiers because we could really use them. We only have 2 spots for soldiers right now, but it's still going to be important for us to do all 3 because it's going to give us that higher chance of receiving the hero units anyways. So let's go ahead and do the gold on this side so you guys can see what that's all about. So I'm gonna wait for the center here because I like doing that. It's something that I'm accustomed to. And then we're gonna go ahead and fire. And as you can see, the ship never entered a damaged state, but was still sunk with only 1 shot of the gold spear. So now we're going to head on over here, and with our 2 stone spears, we'll see if we can sink this ship. And we should well be able to. So there we go, we hit it once. Now it's in a damaged state. And we'll see if we can go ahead and sink it now. And there we have it, our second spear is hit, and we were able to sink both boats. So this wave, we had a really good time because we managed to keep any of the enemies from reaching the dock, and we still have a full line of soldiers here, which is fantastic. However, you're going to see pretty soon why sometimes saving those bolts for later waves instead of shooting the bores of the first wave like I did might be more important for keeping your value. because next wave we're going to get some really high HP enemies, and we're going to have a hard time dealing with them with just soldiers. And look at that, we didn't get a single hero, we got some real bad luck, so we are going to have a pretty dreadful time, I'm going to be honest with you, trying to deal with these guys. We're going to send these guys to get wood because we really need it, but we're really going to want some gold here if we're going to want to live through this wave. So as soon as those guys are done getting wood, we're going to be switching over to our mining, and hopefully we can get some good luck with that. Alright, there's the enemies. You can see this time that the enemies actually have some kind of shield icon on their ship. Now this shield icon is actually indicating that the ship is healthier than the ordinary boat. So it's actually going to take 3 stone spears to sink as opposed to just 1. So gold spears are going to be especially valuable against these guys because we're going to be able to sink so much more HP worth of enemies with only a single shot, as opposed to trying to hit them with 3 stone spears, which could definitely go wrong. But right now we're really just hoping for 1 gold drop, because if we can get that, it's going to help us out in sinking that ship over there. And if we don't get that, well, we're going to be in a pretty rough spot. But we're going to go ahead and craft a barricade, because barricades are very effective against these guys. And unfortunately, we were not able to get a gold drop. We're not going to be sinking an enemy ship here, and we're going to be left in a very rough position. We're going to go ahead and craft... we're not going to have time to get soldiers before those guys get back, so we're going to craft barricades. Unfortunately, I'm going to tell you now, it's not going to be enough to keep us alive from these dudes. The wolves happen to have a lot of HP, and they're meant to be kind of the first big roadblock in a new player's experience. So learning how to manage your spears and your soldiers, what units you should let come to the docks, and which units you should sink prior to this point, it's definitely going to be instrumental in keeping you alive. So we're going to go ahead and craft another gate here. Now, as it happens, we actually crafted it during the time that they were attacking that one. Now this might seem like it is insignificant, but it's actually going to deal extra damage to them. So we are able to clear out those enemies, and unfortunately we only have 2 regular soldiers left versus 2 wolves, and I don't think that's going to do us very much good. So there it is, they were able to clear us out. 1 of the wolves passed through, which actually, we did pretty well to clear 3 out of the 4 of them, because they really are quite the monstrosities to fight. But unfortunately, we'll take the loss here, and we'll go back into our defeat screen, and we're going to have to try again. Now, I don't really want to spoil too much of the boss fight for you guys, so I don't think I'm going to try to press this any further than that. If you guys are interested in what the boss fight is, I strongly encourage you to try this out yourselves. However, I do think I owe it to you guys to show you what the victory screen looks like, at least, so that you guys can enjoy that. So we're going to go ahead and start with talking about our workers here for a minute. So our workers are pretty simple. So whenever you walk up to a worker, you're triggering a player detector, and that player detector is activating this reflector. This reflector is going to teleport all of the icons to it, so that all 3 of these workers can share these icons. This is just a way to save some item space. Then they're going to go ahead and they're going to teleport the relevant invisible button and jump detector to it, so that they're close enough to the player to be used. Then they're going to reset their magic sequencer right over here. And the significance, of course, of resetting this magic sequencer is going to be that it's going to turn the relevant icon visible. In this case, since we're resetting it, it's going to always start with wood. And then it's going to add a signal 2, to its relevant computer. This is going to be how, when you press the button, it determines which task you are currently present on. If signal 2 were present in one of these computers instead, in accordance to which order you were on in the magic sequencer, then it would send them off to do one of the other tasks accordingly. So these computers are going to go ahead once you activate the button, add the relevant signal. These computers are going to go ahead and activate one of the reflectors for their workers over here, which is tied to one of these timers as well. That's what these timers are, what is going to cause them to turn invisible after taking some steps towards the reflector that was activated, and then eventually it's going to activate the timer in each of their spots that actually determines how long it takes um, to perform a given task and get a given resource. So these reflectors are what are going to be activated as a result of you sending them off initially, and they're going to do stuff like set up whatever animations need to happen for the soldiers. They're going to add one, for example, to this counter here, and this counter is what's going to keep track of how many you have working at the same time for the purpose of rare drops. And then, of course, they're going to start the timer that determines how long it actually takes for them to perform the given task. So as far as rare drops actually go, this counter here, when it gets one added to it, it's going to go through a series of different actions. So when it's under value, which means there's less than 2 soldiers present, it's going to make sure that there are no computer signals added between either of these two computers, and therefore there's no chance at all for a rare drop to occur. However, if it's equal value, this computer is going to receive a signal, and if it's over value, this one's going to receive a signal, each time adding in a bonus 25% chance for a rare drop to occur. And you'll see over with the mining section that there's something that is identical to that happening here. The same exact thing is occurring. So when you actually finish collecting a resource, so we'll actually look over here at mining first. When you finish collecting a resource, it's going to go ahead and move the icon for stone south 50 units, which you can see our stone icon is moving south 50 units on the number line, and that's going to go ahead and it's gonna, when it moves south, which is this direction, grant you some stone. Now, actually, the relevance of it moving out of its original position is that it's going to leave these item detectors. And each of these item detectors, their sole responsibility is to detect when an item enters into their area. That's going to tell the system that you are unable to craft that specific item, or you're unable to craft recipes that involve that item. And if it leaves these item detectors, it's going to tell the system, hey, this player has enough of these resources to be able to craft a particular item. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to make that button retrievable through these computers here. And you're going to be able to craft that item because you have those resources. So with soldiers, it's a bit different, though, because instead of ticking an item up on the number line, it has to specifically affect what happens with our soldiers over here. So when these guys finish task, what's actually going to happen is, well, first of all, something is going to get added to. I'll show you that in a second. And then the random reflector here is going to get activated to see if you have a chance to get a hero. And that's really what's going to apply whether or not you get a hero or not, is this random reflector getting activated to see if it can coincide with one of the computers that you may or may not have the other signal added to. But first, before it does that, it's going to go ahead and add to our first unit's counter over here. And these counters are what's telling the system whether a soldier is here or not. Because if this counter is equal to 0, there's no soldier there. And if it's 1 or more, then there is a soldier there. And if it's already at 1, when it gets added to, it's going to go over value, which is going to activate the next one. And if this one's already at 1, it's going to go over value and activate the next one. And that's going to chain all the way down until one of these goes from 0 to 1. And when that happens, when one of these goes to 0 to 1, it will equal value instead, which is going to activate this reflector here. And this reflector here is going to add to this counter, and for each one it will add to its own relevant counter. And what it adds to it is actually going to be what represents your soldier's HP. So in this case, we have a normal soldier from this reflector, so it's going to receive 3 HP total. And then it's going to turn that particular soldier, as you can see here, visible. The next thing it's going to do is add to this computer. Now this computer tells the system that this is the soldier that was just spawned. So now that we know this is the soldier that was just spawned, the system knows that, okay, this is the one that we're considering whether it's going to be a hero or just remain a regular soldier. So if it manages to actually go through that random reflector in those computers over there and apply that soldier buff, what's going to happen is this reflector gets activated, which is adding the second signal to each of the computers. So you now have the second signal being added to this computer, and this is the only computer that has signal 1, which it just received from this reflector. So the two combined will now be able to activate this reflector right here. And this reflector is going to add extra HP to this counter to double the HP that was previously there. It's going to turn the heroic unit visible, and it's going to turn the old soldier invisible. And since this is all occurring at once, that soldier will never have actually turned visible, because that invisibility is going to negate that visibility spell that we got from that first reflector. And this is what's going to occur each time one of those counters initially hits 1, each time that a worker completes the task. And that's kind of how that whole system is set up, to determine whether a soldier is spawned, a hero is spawned, and to do at least one of them no matter what whenever a worker ends up finishing its task. Alright, so now that we've gone ahead and explained these guys, let's talk about barricades. Barricades won't take us that long to talk about. They're pretty darn simple. So when you craft a barricade, it's going to go ahead and it's going to add 1 to this counter here. Very similarly to the soldier system, when it goes over value, it's going to go to the next one. Over value is going to go to the next one. So that if there's already a barricade here, it will go to the next spot. It will always go in order from this barricade first to this barricade to this one. So you can always know which barricade you're going to be building next, because it will always follow that order. Now, when you do reach equal value with this, when it was previously 0, which would indicate that there was no barricade there before, it's going to add a signal to this computer here. And when a signal is added to this computer here, it's going to turn the barricade visible. So that's all that's really happening when you first build a barricade, is it's just turning the barricade visible. However, since you're adding signal 1, this not signal 1 won't be triggered, so it won't turn it invisible and negate it. But that's going to come in handy later, because that's going to be how we determine this turning invisible in a way that's going to save us item space when the boars or the bears or whatever enemies come up to attack these barricades. So yeah, that's really about it. When the enemies actually reach here, there's an item detector in front of each of the barricades, and these are going to add the second signal to that computer that already has signal 1 if you have the barricade crafted, and that's what's going to tell the enemies to actually stop and fight with the barricade. And those are going to activate some kind of damage sequence. So like, for example, this one here, this one will activate this reflector, and this reflector is going to subtract health from the enemies that are coming from this direction, since this barricade only deals with this direction. And then it's going to set this counter to 0, so it's telling the system now there's no barricade here because it just got destroyed. And then it's going to activate a timer, and that timer is going to determine some things about when the enemies actually are doing their attacks, and when their damage actually gets applied to the barricade to destroy it, things like that. And that's really how the barricade works. So that's pretty simple. Now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna steal our flat wooden platform here, so that we can go around and fly off. That's why I actually have 1 free item space right now. Is whenever I need to move around, I go ahead and pick up one of those trees over there, so that I can just I can grab my flat wooden platform here and fly around. It's pretty easy to replace. At this point, I've done it so many times that I have the coordinates for it actually memorized. So we're going to go ahead and we're gonna fly out here so we can look at some of the stuff that is involved with our bow fixtures. Now our bow fixtures are definitely a unique system compared to everything else. You can see there's a jump detector here. Of course, as normal, this is going to be applying to this sequence reflector, just like how we had over there when we were changing icons with our workers, and that's kind of what's going to be driving the change of icons. And also, it's going to be, flip-flopping these two buttons here, depending on if the signals are present in these computers, which of course is also representing whether you actually have a stone spear or a gold spear to fire. And if you do have a stone spear and a gold spear to fire, and the signals are present in these computers, whenever you flip-flop using this jump detector and magic sequencer, you're going to get a button summoned to you. And these are what's going to pull you into the aim mode when you go ahead and press them. So when you press those buttons and you go into the aim mode, it's going to activate this timer here, and these are where the actual spears are. So you're actually all the way up here with your camera view and where the spears are when you fire. This helps bridge the distance a little bit, and it keeps your view out of all of the clutter from back here. Now these are going to summon the proper spears to them. This is going to continuously activate the camera spell, zooming in on this timer, so that until this timer is stopped, until you fire the shot, you will always be looking down sight. It'll keep you in that view. And the other thing that's going to happen when you go into aim mode is you're going to be teleported right in here to this to the center between these two player detectors. And what's going to happen is anytime you move forward, this player detector is going to activate. It's going to add to this sequence reflector, and anytime you move backwards, it's going to subtract from the sequence reflector. Now, when you add to it, it's going to ascend, activating reflectors going up this way, and when you subtract from it, it's going to descend, activating them down that way. So descending is going to activate reflectors to the left, ascending is going to activate them to the right. And each one has a turn target object like this one placed inside of it. So it's going to move the wand's rotation to face a certain direction, either to the left or to the right. And that's how we take care of the very specific rotation that we want for these spears. Because otherwise we couldn't get rotations less than 15 degrees, and being able to particularly pick which rotations we want gives us a lot of freedom for designing this aiming system. So that's kind of how that works. You can't actually go over, because if you go past this last reflector, when you try to ascend, it will actually subtract from itself, which will just reactivate the same one, which will rotate it back to the position it's already in, which is another way of saying it won't do anything at all. And the same thing for this, if you go too far back, so if you go backwards from first and you're going this way, and you activate this one, if you go past that, it's going to add to itself to put it back up to that one, so it can't go below that. So that's how we kind of limit and make sure that it can't just suddenly go from one end to the other very quickly. So once you go ahead and use this jump detector, all of this gets summoned in, by the way, when you go into aiming mode. It isn't here previously, and when you're done with aiming mode, it's going to get removed as well. It's going to be teleported to a reflector that's elsewhere and inaccessible to the player. So once you go ahead and you use this jump detector, it's going to actually go ahead and add a signal to this computer here. And this is the main primary thing that's happening. This computer is actually what's going to drive the movement of those spears. You'll notice it has an AND spell, 1 and 2, and then it activates this reflector here. Now this is very, very important to note. This is a really cool kind of use for a magic computer that's going to be very different from how I use them elsewhere, because this is a toggleable extension of my rapid activation timer here. Now, some of you who saw my bowling video, or not my bowling, but my roller coaster video, might remember this module, the rapid activation timer. And all this really is it's a timer that activates things at a rate faster than 1 second. Normal timers, as you can see if you look into this, they can't go below 1 second in repeated activation. However, this whole thing is set up so that every time this timer enters the space that one of these item detectors is in, it's going to teleport back to this reflector, keep moving in and keep moving in and doing that. And every time it's teleported, this reflector is going to cause an activation to occur. And those activations are what drive all of my reflector chains, and they're what's constantly going to be adding a computer signal to this computer. As it's currently set up, it's going to be 20 activations per second. So what that means is that this computer here is receiving a signal 20 times every single second. However, that's not really going to do anything unless it also has its other signal. So adding and subtracting that second signal that isn't being repeatedly added is going to control whether or not it's able to activate this reflector also at a rate of 20 times per second. Now, it just so happens when you jump, you are adding that extra signal because you're firing, so it's going to successfully start activating this reflector at 20 times per second, which is going to start moving those wands continuously forward in the direction that you have aimed them. And then once they reach an item detector pair over there, that's when they will determine whether they can apply damage or not. Now, one of those item detectors out there in each of those pairs, one of those is going to be in charge of keeping track of whether the boat is within its range, and the other one is going to keep track of whether, when a spear passes through it. Both need to coincide in order to add two complementary signals to their computer. And if that happens, they're going to go ahead and activate this little setup over here, which is going to deal some damage to the boat. Now, the way we actually have damage dealt to the boat, you can kind of see it past there. I'm going to see if I can grab it up for a second. There's actually a magic sequence reflector just past those reflectors and computers over there. I think I should be able to grab it here. Give me just a moment. If I can't, you know what? I can just go ahead and fly over there. That's why I got this this platform out, actually, right? So anytime it takes damage from a spear, and those coincide, it's actually going to subtract from the sequence reflector 2 times. And when that happens, it's going to go down a list of different visibilities and invisibilities to determine what state of damage it's taken. And of course, if it reaches the 8th slot, so if it goes backwards below first, it's going to go ahead and act a reflector, which is actually below the water, which is going to tell all of those objects in the boat and the boat itself to move underwater and sink. And that's going to start a whole sequence, of course, that tells the system that that group of enemies has now been defeated, and that's going to be important later for determining when the round actually ends. So that's just very basically how this whole spear shooting actually works. Unfortunately, there are ways that you can shoot outside of the parameters of those rotations, and if you do, and it doesn't get close enough to one of these item detectors, you're actually going to completely lose your ability to shoot those spears anymore. So you want to make sure that when you fire, your spear has completely fully rotated so that you don't accidentally lose the ability to shoot spears for the rest of the match. Now, once these actually, the spears actually leave the item detector here, once they actually leave, they're going to start the sequence to go ahead and reset all of the ballista functions over there so that you can actually use it again and fire a bolt afterwards. So that basically explains that. Now, at the start of each round, what's going to actually determine enemy movement, if we come all the way over here, are these messy clump of reflectors over here. And these used to not look too messy. There used to be a lot more organized, but over time I had to make a lot of changes, and now we have this interesting row of reflectors right here. But nevertheless, that's pretty much irrelevant. At the start of each wave, except for the first, because the first one gets to just be started initially, this sequence reflector is going to be activated, and this is what's going to start the chain of reflectors for each individual round. So this, of course, is the bears. Right here is this chain getting activated. This is the wolves, and then the boss is kind of elsewhere. But anyways, we'll start by looking at the boars here. Okay, so The first reflector in each of these chains is going to actually turn their relevant enemies visible, and that's the primary thing that's going to happen there. There's some computer signals that are going to be added or removed from different locations. This is important for keeping the enemy movement when they get on the docks more neat and tidy, but that's kind of a huge that's a huge headache, and we're not going to get too far into that because that might take us all day. Um, Now, aside from actually turning them visible, each one is going to activate the rest of their reflector chain. So it's going to go down this line here. And this line here is mostly going to be add to counter spells. And these are what are actually adding to those counters that you saw on the dock that represent the enemy health. So the more that we add to them, the higher the health the enemies are. Uh, and it's for this reason that we're actually reusing these reflectors for each of the chains afterwards. So you'll actually notice that in the bear chain, you actually get, let me try to find it here for a second. In the bear chain, you actually get this whole chain of reflectors activated again as well. This is because there's no reason to add even more reflectors that add to the same counters that these ones are already adding to when you're trying to make the bear HP. So we just need to have a little bit longer reflector chain here so that we can add to it what we need extra, and then we can use what we already used before. And it's going to be the same thing for the wolves. The first one makes them, the first one is going to go ahead and make them visible. If I can find that here, I think I might have, yeah, I a little bit disorganized here. But the first one's going to go ahead and make the wolves visible, and then after that, each of its chains are going to go ahead and add through the rest of the HP calculation that we already used in the prior rounds. And then what's going to happen is we're going to actually have a reflector way off in the distance, way out there, activated. And that's what's going to tell this entire group of enemies, boat included, to move in that direction. Now, it's actually really important that we have them move in that direction so far away, because when they move in that direction so far away, the difference between their positioning becomes far more negligible. Since each of them have their own coordinate positioning where they currently are, if I were to move them to a single point, let's say over here, by the time they reached this location, they would all be in very different shifting locations from where they initially began. In regards to where they are pertaining to each other, they wouldn't be aligned properly, in other words. But putting it at a further distance than is necessary is going to make sure that I can move them all towards the same location. If we can spot it here. It's going to make sure we can move them all towards the same location. And have their actual position discrepancy be much less notable. So you can see that the reflector is very far off. It's probably more than twice the distance that it needs to actually go over, and that's going to help keep it appearing that the whole group of enemies is moving together as a unit and not shifting in any weird ways. For this side, a specific item detector is going to indicate when the boat crosses to change their direction to move over here to these reflectors. This is important because on this side we actually have a bend to go around, so it has to move back over to the side once it reaches there so that it can actually get to the dock properly. On this side, we do pretty much the same thing, but we're able to make it almost a clean straight shot all the way over, so it's not very problematic by comparison. Alright, so once the enemy soldiers go ahead and reach the docks, they're going to be activating this item detector, which activates these sets of reflectors, these sets on this side. And there's a reason there's 2 on this side and 3 on this side, but I won't get too far into that. Suffice to say, it's a manner of saving item space. We're using one of the reflectors on this side to represent 2 positions for the soldiers to move to, but for this side, for certain reasons, we're unable to do that. So once the soldiers reach the docks, they'll be commanded through use of, let's see if I can find them real quick, through use of these reflectors here to go ahead and navigate up the dock. This one is actually activating a reflector which is stopping all of them, and this one is activating a reflector which is starting all of their movement. And all of them are tied to the same breadcrumb, which is all the way back there, way behind the fortress. And again, similar to why we have that reflector way off in the distance, their breadcrumb is way off in the distance as well, so that as they walk towards it, their position relative to each other appears not to change. It seems that they all just walk straight, as opposed to all walking towards the same point and getting closer to one another. So all of them are going to utilize that to make sure that their distance to one another is pretty consistent. So once they go ahead and get up to the gate, they'll run into that item detector I talked about. If there's a barricade there, of course, they're going to go through that damage calculation that we already discussed before, and then they're going to walk up to the gate, or they're going to walk past the barricades after destroying them and run into our enemies who are going to be right up here. Now you can see there is an item detector for each row of enemies. It's important for several reasons that we keep the damage calculation between each group of enemies different from one another. Essentially the same way that we have counters chaining together back here for our soldiers. When health is subtracted from a ally or enemy soldier, it's going to actually move down the chain and subtract from the next soldier after that. It's possible that the enemies on this side will not be remotely close to the damage source that this side of enemies are taking when they're taking damage. So linking those enemies together with these enemies is very bad, because it means that they might have damage dealt to them in situations where they aren't present, and that's not going to feel very right. So we have damage calculation for each side as its own separate thing. And that's largely what this huge mess of computers back here, even there, even some way back there, which I won't be getting to. Most of these computers and that whole tree of computers is dealing with determining which enemy group should be taking damage right now, and which enemy group should be progressing through the ranks of your soldiers and barricades right now. Now, when one of these item detectors is activated by an enemy passing through, and they engage in combat with that particular row of soldiers, one of these two computers over here is going to be activated. Now, which one of these gets activated just depends on the enemy group, and that's what all these computers, of course, are here for, to determine. Now, these two computers are going to behave very similarly to how the computer that drives our spear movement works. They are having a signal added to them at a rate of 20 times per second. So, when they receive their second signal, they're going to drive their reflectors at 20 activations per second as well. Now, when these start running at 20 activations per second, each time they activate, they're going to remove 1 health from that particular group of enemies that's engaging, and 1 health from your row of enemies. And they're going to continuously remove 1 HP from each group at the same time repeatedly until one of them is dead. Whether it's the group of enemies or that particular row of units. If it's a group of enemies, that's great. Now the other group of enemies, if they're still around, can progress through. And if it's your row of allies, then they get to move again and progress to whichever group of other soldiers that you have. And if there are none, then they get through and you're defeated. And that's essentially just how that whole thing works, without getting too much into detail. I'm a little bit scared to try to go into depth on this whole section, because this is without a doubt the most complex section of them all, just dealing with the amount of computer signals that need to be added and subtracted depending on different situations. And then when both groups of enemies have been defeated, of course, a computer signal from each of these reflectors here actually is going to be added to that computer all the way down there at the end. And that computer is what's going to start the 1-minute timer to actually get ready for the next wave. And that just about does it for the general explanation of how everything works. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, and there's other aspects like, wow, why are there these random hopscotch mats just kind of floating out here? But for the most part, that covers the general function of the game. Alrighty, guys, that'll do it for this project. I really hope that you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope if you get the chance to check it out in game, you have a lot of fun with it, and hopefully even get a win out of it. But either way, I really do hope you guys enjoyed and appreciated the amount of work that went into this, and everything that it has accomplished. If you guys do decide to go ahead and check it out in game, just remember, be polite to other people who might already be present. They're trying to play games too. Anything you can do to help the smoothness of how this works, keeping it single player as much as possible, I really appreciate it. Um, and if you want to see more projects like this in the future, I'm very passionate about this. I really enjoy doing this, so you can be sure to see some more in the future. So if you want to subscribe and keep track of that'd be great. And I hope to excite you guys with something new and unexpected again pretty soon. Alright, well, have a great rest of your day, whatever time you guys are watching this, and thank you so much. Bye.